Good evening, everyone. My name is Katrina, and I work for Cooperation Ireland on the Our Generation project. Very welcome to our webinar this evening. The topic is relieving back to school anxiety. I am delighted to announce that we are joined by a number of participants from right across the island to hear three inspiring speakers and join a conversation on the issue of back to school anxiety faced by children and young people, as well as you as a parent, and how it can impact the entire family. This is the final webinar in this series, focusing on a key area of interest identified through our work in the project, and we hope you find it both educational and useful. The format for this evening is to hear from our three speakers, Dr. Pooky Knightsmith, Bronagh and Spiers from Parenting NI team. Each presentation will be followed by a Q&A session, so we hope you will have lots of questions for us, and we encourage you to post your comments and questions in the live chat box, which is located at the bottom of the screen. I would now like to introduce our first speaker this evening, Dr. Pooky Knightsmith, mental health educator, speaker, author, and advisor. An internationally respected face of child and adolescent mental health, Pooky works tirelessly to be the change she wants to see. A prolific keynote speaker, lecturer, trainer, and author, she develops and shares practical, evidence-informed approaches to promoting mental health, arming health and education staff with skills, information, and knowledge they need to support the children in their care. Please welcome Dr. Pooky Knightsmith.
Thank you ever so much, Katrina and team, and thank you everyone who's taking the time out from your busy evenings at this time of year to join this evening. In addition to that really lovely welcome, and I always find it hard to live up to how I sound on paper, but also of, I think, great relevance tonight, I'm also a mum. I have two daughters, one biological, one adopted, and both of them find school sometimes a joy, but often a challenge. And it's back to school this week in England. And so those of you who are really living this right now, I hear you too. So sharing this from both a personal and a professional perspective. I'm just going to share my slides with you. These will all be shared with you afterwards, as well as some notes that I've put together that you're welcome to use, share, adopt, use in any way that you want to. So I've tried to keep it quite simple this evening. I generally find that kind of simple, practical ideas, ones that you feel like I might actually be able to do that when things are a bit tired, a bit fraught, a bit challenging, are the most helpful. So hopefully there'll be a few in here that you can cherry pick. Don't feel like you should do them all. Just listen out for the one or two that you think, yeah, that could work for me and my kid, and give it a go. I would recommend, though, I always recommend just keep a little stash of all the different ideas that you hear this evening. Stash away the presentations, note down a few things, because things that might not feel like the right thing right now might come back around and feel like a good thing later on. So back to school anxiety, 10 ideas for you this evening. Right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is if-then planning. If-then planning is what I'm having to use right now. So this is where we plan for all the things that could go wrong. And we think, if this happens, then I will. So I do this when I'm presenting. If we were together in real life today, then in the back of my car, I would have a projector in case the projector had gone wrong. I would have a spare computer. I'd often have a flip chart and pens. I'd have every adapter you could possibly imagine. I'd have backups of everything. When I'm speaking at an event, I often become like the extra tech person because I'm so prepared for everything to go wrong. And there's always a plan in place. And this is something we can do with our children as well, because when they are thinking about school or other things that worry them, they will often have a big, long list of stuff that's really, really concerning them, things that they're really worried about. And we can kind of do one of two things here. We can either try to ignore those things or sort of dismiss them, move away from them, distract them, think about something else. Or we can say, okay, you've got some worries here. I'm going to hear those worries. Let's think about them together. And let's think about what we'll do if those worries were to come true. When we do this, when we say, if this happens, then you could X, Y, Z, then it allows our child to actually feel really heard. It helps them to realize that we do care about their worries, that we're kind of validating them, but it also gives them a kind of go-to set of ideas for things that they might do if those things were to happen. So this might be, what if no one will play with me in the lunch break? Then we would think, okay, then what could you do? You could go up and talk to someone and ask if you could join in with them. You could ask your teacher to introduce you into a game that's already happening. You could sit and read quietly if you wanted to be on your own. The best thing to do is to kind of brainstorm it out with your child. But the idea is we think if this thing goes wrong, if this difficulty occurs, then I could X. And it's not about trying to make the biggest list of worries ever. It's about being realistic and understanding that there will be challenges that we'll face day to day. And if we're a little bit prepared for them, then we feel more able to manage them. And it also means that if and when some of those things do happen, then we're able to respond in a way that enables us to carry on coping rather than falling into a sort of tailspin of despair. So that's if-then planning. The next idea is tiny steps and I can cycles. So the idea of this is that when we're thinking with a child who's very anxious, very worried about things, who might feel that things are a bit hopeless, that they're likely to fail, that all things feel a bit too big and a bit too scary, it can feel like that for both our child and indeed for us sometimes. What we want to do is to break down our goals, which might be going to school, staying in school, engaging in class. We want to break those goals down into tiny, tiny, tiny steps. Ideally, we want to break things down into steps so minuscule, so tiny, so easy for our child to achieve that they just think it's almost silly that we're expecting them to do that. They think, well, of course I can do that. Of course I can. Because often here we're working with a child who's used to thinking, I can't, I'll fail. This is too hard. So we want to make it really easy. Tiny, tiny, tiny steps are also great because each time we take a small step, then we can think about the next step and then the next step and then the next step. And when we've taken lots and lots and lots of very tiny, tiny, tiny steps, then actually, if we have a bit of a wobble one day and we fall back a few steps, we don't go too far. Those steps weren't too big. And it feels possible just to get back up them again. It's also helpful after things like weekends and holidays and things like that. It feels more possible just to regain those steps that we might have done. This ends up helping us to create these kind of cycles of I can. So every time your child succeeds in taking a really, really tiny step, then they realize there's something they can do. And they begin to realize that they are someone who can, I can. And that's so, so important, particularly for children who've experienced a lot of anxiety, perhaps a lot of failure, perhaps a lot of feelings of hopelessness. So we want to build those cycles, and they can be really, really positively reinforcing. Every time that your child realizes I can, then they become more able to try to do the next thing. So it's a really, really positive thing. So break those steps down really, really small. So for example here, if you have a child who perhaps finds the idea of going to school really unmanageable, perhaps you've got a child who's got really significant school-based anxiety, then we wouldn't be saying, right, well, what we're going to do is try and go to school for a week. We would be saying something like, okay, what we're going to try and do is go and stand outside the school at the weekend when it's quiet and there's no children, no teachers there. We're just going to go and be near it. Do you think we can do that? And more than likely your child will say, yeah, I think we can do that. So we do that. We do the tiny, tiny thing. So we can think with our child about how to break it down. What's a small enough step that they absolutely feel that they can? We try to take those tiny steps and build those positive cycles. Now, the cycles, the positive cycles are really important, because what can happen if we don't encourage and scaffold and support our child to continue to try to do the things that feel hard with tiny steps, then we can get into this cycle of anxiety where our child's world gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So what can come quite naturally as a parent or a carer is actually to support the anxiety cycle without meaning to. So our child might be very anxious about something, so going into school, for example, and they might might seem really, really distressed and really upset and really worried. And then we go a bit mama bear or papa bear on them, and we might want to take them away from that thing that scares them, that thing that's causing them such distress that we're seeing in them, wanting to protect them, wanting to make them feel okay. So we help them to avoid the thing, because that's our job as a parent or a carer. We want to make them feel better right now. And when we do that briefly, our child feels better because we've taken them away from that thing that scared them right now. However, that tells their brain that was a lucky escape. And their brain imagines all the things that would have happened if they'd have done the scary thing. And actually that makes the anxiety grow, and it makes them less able to do the thing next time. So actually, the really supportive thing for us to do, the ultimate mama, papa bear thing to do, is to stand with our child, to support them and to scaffold the experience through tiny achievable steps so they can actually do the things that feel quite scary and difficult, to try, if we can, to tolerate a little bit of that distress so that they can have a decent experience. It's not about it being a really good, a really positive, skipping, joyful experience. It's about it being maybe just neutral, and them realizing, and their brain realizing, this didn't all go horribly, horribly wrong. It's okay. Maybe it wasn't wonderful, but it was okay. And then next time when they come to face that thing again, then their brain's not saying, I had a lucky escape last time, better not do that. That brain is going, okay, I'm not full of joy at this idea, but it was all right. Nothing awful happened. And we begin to replan those neural pathways a little bit. So actually this slide neatly summarizes that. It's almost like I wrote them. You'll get a copy of these. So the key thing here is this idea of avoiding avoidance. And that's one of the most challenging things for us to do when you are faced with a child who's really distressed. We just want to make them feel better, but it will make their world shrink and shrink and shrink. So we're looking to support and scaffold, support those neutral experiences. They don't have to be positive, fantastic if they are, but neutral is good enough. And we're going to take those tiny steps and try to build those new neural pathways. We're going to collect those things that our child can do, because our child will need to have that positive reinforcement and that reminder that they can. Remembering that often our anxious children, our worried children, are children who are used to feeling, thinking, seeing, I can't. They may feel that they're likely to fail. They may have quite a lot of experience of failing or not managing or not coping. And that's really, really tough. So what we want to do is to help them to realize that they can. And we're doing that by taking these tiny steps and creating opportunities for our child to succeed. Next step is to collect those successes. So I like to create an I did it jar. You might have a poster. You can do this how you like, but it's about creating a tangible record of the stuff that your kid managed to do. So you might be writing on a post-it note every time that your child does something that makes you or them proud, even the tiny, tiny things. I've seen it done before where someone wrote it in Sharpies on pebbles in a jar. You might collect it on bits of paper and fold them up. One of my daughters is very beautiful with calligraphy, and she's made kind of posters of the things that she's been proud of. The key thing is to collect them and reflect on them and remind ourselves that we can. That reminder not only tells your child, you can, you got this, you did this, it helps them if they need to revisit these things later. If we do take a couple of steps back or there is a short break, then it enables them to remind themselves, I was able to do this before, I reckon I can do it again. Or when they're preparing to do the next hard thing, they can remind themselves, I did do all these other things, so maybe, just maybe, I can do this next hard thing. Tangible physical reminder for them can be super, super helpful. Next thing I want you to think about is about the motivations driving all this stuff with you and your child right now. So you are likely wanting them to go to school. You're really hoping that they will engage. You're hoping that they will make some friends, that progress will be made, and so on and so forth. There's so many hopes and aspirations that we have for our children and those in our care when it comes to going to school. But we need to be really, really careful when we're trying to change behaviour in particular, that we are led where possible by our child's motivations rather than by adult motivations. Now, that does not mean that we don't achieve the same aim in the end. A key aim here is going to be, I'd like my child to go to school and to enjoy going to school in an ideal world. But the thing behind that, the motivation behind that might be very different for you than for your child. You might be thinking about the long term. I would like my child to go to school so that they are likely to have a successful future and positive educational outcomes and a life that will be great for them to live and all those things. Your child, however, might not really see it that way, might not be very motivated to do these hard things in order to achieve those lofty aspirations that feel so far into the future for them. But they might be motivated by the fact that their best friend is in their class and they'd like to play with them on break time, or the fact that maybe Lego Club is happening on Thursday and that's their favourite thing, or by the fact that they really like a particular member of staff who they might be able to sit and chat with during one of their lessons or breaks. So their motivations often are really tiny and might seem to us quite insignificant. But they're the things that are driving our child to behave in the ways that drive towards our big aspirations, our motivations. But when we think about it from the point of view of our child and we reframe what we're doing and we see it from their point of view and we say, okay, what do we need to do to try and help you to go into school on Thursday? Because wouldn't it be great if you could go to Lego Club with Siobhan? Wouldn't that be fab? If we can help them to do that, see it from their point of view, be driven by their motivations, they're going to try a little bit harder. They're going to have that bit more buy-in. So see things from the point of view of your child. Next suggestion from me this evening is to focus in on the positives. So we can sometimes find that our children, if they're very anxious, then they will have all sorts of kind of cognitive distortions, so sort of slightly faulty thinking patterns, essentially. We can all fall victim to them that make them see the world through a bit of a negative lens. And what we want is to encourage our child to see the positives in every day so that they can be celebrating the successes and seeing what they've enjoyed about each day. So one thing I will always talk to my children about at the end of the day is, what were 3 good things that happened today? We need to try and drive that conversation, make it positive, look for the positives very proactively and make that a habit so that our child gets used to looking for the good in every day. If we don't do that, then often our anxious, our worried, or our low child will look for the bad first, because that is the way that their brain is kind of tuned. Doing this every day, always looking for the positives, over time will actually change how your child does begin to perceive and think about things, and they'll begin to search for those little good things that they can tell you about at the end of the day without you even having to prompt them. So it's a really, really nice habit to get into, one to do as you're on the way home from school, or the first thing that you might do as you are home together of an evening. Number 6, really, really practical one, is a laminated kiss. If you've got a child who is struggling with kind of separation anxiety, who's finding it very hard to say goodbye, them having something tangible of you, of yours, that they can carry with them as a kind of little transitional object that they can literally touch, hold, smell, feel throughout the day can be really helpful. This could be all sorts of different things. Some people do it with jewelry. Some people will give the child a small item to carry. One thing you could do is to kiss a piece of paper, maybe spray it with a perfume or cologne that you use as well, and laminate it and allow your child to carry it around. That's very much a little part of you that they can keep with them if they want to. But just having something they can have in a pocket that nobody else necessarily needs to see, that they can touch, they can feel, and know that they're kind of connected to you, can be a really helpful thing for our children who are struggling with that separation anxiety. Number 7, it's a whistle-stop tour. Hope you're enjoying the ride. Number 7 is slow, low, low. So this is one of my favorite techniques of all time to teach. So this is about, if we've got a child who's really, really anxious and we need to try and calm things down, this is about changing how we speak in order to calm down that moment and to help that child to feel a little bit calmer. So the best thing for an anxious child, or an angry child actually, to help them to calm is a calm adult. That can be hard because when our child is distressed, we tend to feel distressed too, but we want them to catch our calm. So we go to our slow, low, low speech. We slow down, we speak more slowly, we lower the pitch, so we speak a bit more deeply, and we lower the volume. So we do this because when we're anxious or when we're angry, we tend to speak fast, we tend to speak loud, and we tend to speak shrilly and in a very high pitch. So we're trying to do the opposite. Just imagine you're reading a lovely bedtime story to your child, trying to soothe them to sleep. That's the tone you're going for. No matter what you say, if you say it in those tones, it's like an audible hug for your child. If you ever speak to them on the phone, if there's distress and they call home from school as well, then again, adopting that slow, low tone can really help those moments as well. Number 8, we're nearly there because we're on 10 altogether. Number 8 is about flipping the feeling. So this is about talking to our child about the fact that when we think about how anxiety and worry feels in our body, it actually feels quite similar to a quite different feeling, which is being excited. So if we try, sometimes we can flip the feeling of anxiety and worry into a feeling of excitement. So we might look with our child and think, what are we excited about today? So rather than being anxious about it, we're going to think, what am I excited about today? Because those feelings of your heart going fast and maybe getting a little bit short of breath and all those different physiological things that you might discuss with your child, they go with excitement too. If you're about to get on a roller coaster or you were going to go and do something that really made you excited, you'd feel just like that. So let's look for the excitement in the day and try and flip that feeling from anxiety to excitement. This is one of those ones that for some of you, you'll be sat there going, I can do that. This will work for my child. Others will be going, no way. So if you think it might work for you, explore it, do it. If not, that's okay. But just remember it because another day it might work. Penultimately, routines and rituals. So if you're struggling with your child going in, if they're finding that drop off hard, if there's a lot of anxiety about going in each day, actually thinking about your routines and rituals for each day and trying to make it the same can be super helpful. Having the same routine each morning so your child knows exactly what to expect takes all the guesswork out of it, and it becomes easier and easier and easier to do things, because when we form habits, they become like kind of muscle memory, and we've done the hard thing so many times that we've kind of got used to it, become sort of normalized, desensitized, all those things. So the more we do the same thing, no matter how scary it is, then the easier it feels. So try to make things a little bit boring, a little bit repetitive, have some routines, and maybe build some little rituals in with your child as well. So you might have a ritualistic way of saying goodbye. We in our household love a fancy handshake. So we might do kind of weird handshakes to say good night if my child's anxious about going to sleep, or goodbye if they're worried about the drop off to school. Make your own, have a little ritual about how you say goodbye, and do it in the same way every day, and it will get easier. And then finally, if your child's got lots and lots and lots of pent up anxiety, that can go with quite a lot of kind of pent up energy and feelings and stuff that needs to come out. It's really important that we do allow stuff to come out when we've got it inside, because if we don't find kind of healthy outlets for those feelings, then sometimes they will come out in less healthy ways. So there's a few ways of doing this. And again, you'll get all the slides. Don't feel you have to memorize it. I love a bit of alliteration. So you've got all the shiz here. So we can share it. So your child might talk about it, they might draw about it, they might write it down. They don't have to share it with the world, they might share it with a journal, but sometimes just getting it out can really help. That can particularly help with transitions. So if they are scared at school, they might want to do that when they transition home. Or if there's challenging stuff going on at home, they might find this a helpful transition as they go into school. Shelf it. This is about acknowledging that, do you know what? Sometimes this isn't the right moment to be dealing with this worry in depth, but we might deal with it later. So maybe now we've got to go to maths, but later, maybe this member of support staff is going to listen to what I have to say. So sometimes we can actually make an appointment with that worry, and you might do that with your child as well. So if one of my daughters is saying to me, just as they're about to go to sleep, I'm really worried about X that's happening at school tomorrow, then I'll acknowledge that and say, that does sound a bit worrying. So let's talk about it in the morning. We'll talk about it straight after breakfast. How about that? And we'll make a deal on it. And that gives my child permission not to worry about it right now, knowing that we'll come back to it. It sounds unlikely, but it genuinely really works. Some kids will really respond well to having like an appointment slip or something like that too. So you can actually say, I promise we're going to talk about it at this time, or send them a message or whatever you need to do. Let them know we're going to come back to it. Shout it. Sometimes we just got to get it out. We got a lot of actual energy. They might want to run, they might want to jump, they might want to scream into a pillow. Just get it out. Sometimes the feelings just feel like they're going to overwhelm us, and our child isn't ready to go and engage with learning until they've done something to get that energy out. One of our favorites in our household, not necessarily practical as you're arriving at school, but is to play swing ball. So we love to hit the ball around with tennis rackets. That really, really helps us, but just getting that anxious energy out. And again, something like that when your child gets home from school can be helpful if the school day has been worrying for them. And then finally, shed it. Our kids need to realize that sometimes these worries are not theirs to carry. Sometimes the worries are about all sorts of other adult things. And we need to say, okay, that's a really important worry, but it's not your worry. Let me take that one away from you. Let me carry that burden for you. This is my job as an adult. It's okay for you to stop worrying about that. And again, sometimes children need to hear that really, really explicitly, to be given permission to pass that worry on. So there you go, 10 ideas, whistle-stop tour. I hope there were some helpful ones in there, and you'll get a copy of all the slides, and there are some other notes that go with it as well. And I'm really happy to take a couple of questions. I'm aware we're quite tight on time. Sorry about that. So.
Thank you so much. That was brilliant. Thank you. We have a question in from Breege. Breege is saying, my child has lots of anxiety. When we get closer to school, his legs start shaking and he hits himself to try and control his feelings. Most days he can't make it into school. How can I help him?
So I think the key thing here is just to try and really, really break it down and try to understand what's going on for your child here and what's driving that anxiety. So where you're seeing that kind of repeated cycle, it's time to get really, really curious about, why is that? What exactly is it that's driving that anxiety? Is it a person? Is it a place? Is it something specific? And try to really understand it. I will share with you so that you can share it out with everyone, a resource I've just written that will go out this weekend about sort of challenging behaviour. And in there's a little behaviour journal that you can fill out. And you might find, Brace, that with this, just noticing what's happening, seeing when it happens, and then thinking about the small changes we might make to try and change that behaviour might be really helpful. But yeah, get curious, try to work out what is it that's triggering this, because we can't try to change it or support it unless we understand what's the trigger.
Thank you, Pooky. Another one there. My child associates school with germs and has a degree of emetophobia. He has
It's a fear of vomiting, I think. Yeah.
He has ASD, won't eat in school, uses a hand wash every 2 days, drops off uniform and showers for half an hour before he even talks when he comes in. He has zero positives about school. His only motivation is farming, which is not easy in a city. Lots of cognitive distortions. Any ideas?
Wow, that's really, really big and really, really tricky. First of all, it sounds like challenging, but it's great that there's something there. There is a motivation there. There's farming. I would be looking to see if there is an ally within school who might be able to get behind the farming as a motivation, because it may be that school can become a little bit more interesting and engaging for him. If, for example, I don't know what age this child is, but sometimes we can be thinking about farming in maths, or we can find different ways to make that work if you've got a motivated member of staff. And then when it comes to the things about the sort of the germ phobia and the health stuff, then the very helpful kind of literature to be looking at there would actually be the OCD type literature. And there's lots of really good, really simple cognitive behavioral therapy type approaches that may work for that young man. And they're really, really worth looking at.
That's great, thank you. We'll get one last one, and maybe best way to manage a 4-year-old drop off, goes in kicking and screaming. As it's happening, what do? We do try to be persistent and consistent and just say goodbye and walk away.
Yeah, it's really tough. So here I would be thinking with the school about what they can be doing to help here. So I don't know what's happening their end, but there's lots that they can be doing. What we want is for that child to feel really warmly welcomed, to know exactly who they're going to and what is going to happen when they get to school. So it's thinking here about what would motivate your child to go in. Is there a person? Is there an activity? Is there something that they might like to be able to do? So we need to try and build some, not necessarily positive, but some neutral experiences for that child and try to just do it tiny bit by bit. We do need to try and be persistent and consistent, but you also don't want to leave your child utterly distressed. One final thing to check in here with the staff is actually to find out what happens after you go, because quite often it can be that we leave a child in such deep distress, but quite soon after they do settle quite well. And it's really helpful for us to actually understand what does happen next with our child, because often we carry a lot of anxiety about how our child is feeling, and we can end up accidentally exacerbating things because we're anxious about their anxiety and so on. So check in with staff about what's happening, but make a plan with them. Your child needs a routine. It's not just about you, it's about what's happening when they arrive, something that will motivate them in, and a person who will be there to literally hold their hand as they go in, who they feel motivated by.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. That was a wonderful presentation. Lots of brilliant ideas. I love the I did it jar and the 3 good things. I think we all could do with the 3 good things every day, couldn't we?
I do it every day.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to move on now to our next speaker. Our second speaker this evening is Bronagh Spiers. So renowned adolescent psychologist and trauma specialist Bronagh Spiers is founder and director of Blackfort Adolescent Gestalt Institute and programme director for the MSc Adolescent Psychotherapy in Dublin Counselling and Therapy Centre. She maintains a private practice in Omagh, Northern Ireland, as a psychotherapist, clinical supervisor, writer, presenter and trainer, specialising in working with adolescents, as well as her work as a parent and consultant with many families, schools and agencies. She is also an experienced therapist working with children, adults and groups. And Bronagh has very kindly supported us on the Our Generation project as well. Please welcome Bronagh Spiers.
Thanks very much, Katrina. That all sounded really good until you realise that I wrote it myself, and then self-praise is no praise. So hopefully you can all see me okay here. So I'm going to talk or focus maybe on adolescents and them starting back to school now just at this time of the year. And I suppose my experience of young people starting back, there are 4 responses to school return, and one of them is the teenager who's just delighted to be back, loves school, flourishes with friendships. This is really great, and you're just charmed if you're rearing one of those. The second is to, and I suppose a lot of kids will actually be in this category where they're really happy to go back to see their friends, but not to study. I don't want to do the work, but it's really nice to see people. Then the next category are the young people who are just really annoyed to be back in school, like it's interrupting their gaming life or their sleep schedules or their social life, and they're just not motivated at all. And we worry about those kids, like their attitude and stuff. And then the 4th category of teenager, and probably why a lot of you are here tonight, is the anxious teenager who often is very academically inclined, but it feels quite overwhelmed at the thought of going back to school and the thought of talking to people. And often there are 2 big things that really make it difficult for kids. One of them is the social piece, having to navigate all that, having to talk to loads of people. How do you do that? How do you make friends? So there can be like isolation and a lack of courage. And the other is the academic component. The so many young people who are anxious tend to be a perfectionist, and they put themselves under so much pressure academically as well. So doing a homework over the weekend isn't just a chore. There's a fear that they'll get it wrong and they'll not fail or whatever. So there can be a lot going on, and leaving the comfort zone of family in the summer and a much more laid back potentially life space. So with those anxious teenagers, there are 2 groups in particular, I suppose, that are going to have maybe a tougher time at the start of the academic year. And one is the transitioners from primary to secondary school, and the other are the exam students, the GCSE, the A-level, the Leaving Cert exams. And maybe just to acknowledge what's going on for them. So for the transitioners, they have a whole new school system. There was one teacher and you sat in their class all day and they managed everything. And now you've got like maybe 5 to 8 teachers a day. And you're physically you're in loads of different rooms, and there's a bell going, you have to pack your bag and go to this room and go to that room and sit beside someone else, and managing their timetable and managing their time, getting when the bell goes from here to there and walking from one end of the school to the other and getting lost because the school is so massive, and packing their bags. It's always funny to see, the year 8s going into school, because it looks like their bag is going to topple them over. It's so much in it. And then, of course, navigating the new social field. They may or may not have friends from primary school with them. They might be completely isolated, and maybe find it difficult to make friends. So this is all happening also in the context of whatever loss there is from primary school. And often with anxious kids, they love familiarity. So the familiarity of my primary school, I was there for 6 or 7 years, and I knew my teacher really well and the friends that I had. So one of the things to be mindful of, if you have a transitioner at the minute, is they're probably going to have episodes of feeling absolutely overwhelmed and absolutely exhausted. And it's physical and social and academic overwhelm, and physical and social and academic exhaustion as well. So be patient with them, and don't keep asking them how they're getting on. Give them space to do other things and to decompress as well. Maybe on the drive home from school, or within the first half, or well, how did today go? And then put school to the side, because a lot of the time anxious kids feel that they're related to as a student. Like mum and dad just talk about school, people just ask me about school all the time. Because if I say to some kid who's not anxious about school, like, how's school going, they'll just answer the question. But if I ask a kid who's anxious, how's school going, they feel stressed by the question. So the conversations about school and exams and settling in and all the rest of it can by nature actually be stressful. So be mindful of picking the conversations. And then, of course, for the exam students, there's additional pressure, because these are not just class tests. These really are going to predict future possibilities. A lot of expectations. It really challenges them to take ownership of their future as well. When they get to exam stage, there's a big question in everybody's lips, like, what are your plans? So what are your plans for next year? What are your plans for college? What do you want to do now when you grow up? Like, what is this career going to be? So they become very future oriented, and that's great if you really have known from your 12 years of age that you want to be a teacher, but so many of them don't. And again, lots of other kids are like, I'm not sure. But when you ask an anxious kid, they feel pressured by those questions. And then every time a teacher mentions GCSEs or coursework or whatever, there's this emergence of a big bubble of stress. I have a client at the minute, and whenever she hears these words about, there's an assessment next week, she's got these big nails and she just rips skin off her. It's almost like a self-harm thing. And when she does it, she's not even aware that she's doing it. When she does it, she just feels that relief, because there has been a real upsurge of pressure. And people ask me, with teenagers, like, do you have any strategies and techniques for helping my teenager with anxiety? And what I always say to people is, the most influential thing that you have in your toolkit is your relationship with your teenager, how you relate to the anxiety and how you relate to your teenager. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And I suppose to begin with, parents tend to end up kind of getting stuck with a few predictable patterns, and one of them is reassuring. So anxious people need reassurance. Oh, I'm so fat and I'm so ugly and I'm so stupid and I think I'm going to fail this and I don't think I can go to college, and we reassure them about their body and how they look and their academic work and their future. We reassure them about failure and about not being good enough and dying and also all their worries. And parents will reassure them about these things. And that doesn't work. They feel soothed momentarily, but as soon as the conversation's over, all those worries come back again. And you tend to recycle. You have these big conversations with your kid and you're reassuring them, but you could nearly just record that and press play next week, because you'll have almost a verbatim conversation about the same stuff and you'll be doing the same reassuring. And if reassurance worked, you'd only need to have that conversation once. That will be it. But that is not the case. And the other pitfall that happens with parents is invalidating your teenager's experience, and you don't even realize that you're invalidating it. Like, so they're telling you their worries, they're telling you what they're worried about, and frightened of, and often our response will be, there's no need to be worried about it, or look, you'll be fine, just go on ahead and you'll be grand, or look, nothing bad's going to happen, or why don't you just try and stop thinking about it and do something else. And that sounds really good, but it's very, very difficult to implement. So what we're saying when we're given that kind of advice, just put it out of your mind, stop thinking about it. When we give that advice, we're basically saying, you see how you feel, just dismiss it. And that's huge for young people. So they often will think, Mom doesn't understand me, or nobody understands me. So the thing to remember is that your teenage son or daughter is in an irrational space. Anxiety is really, really irrational. But not always. Most of the time, it's irrational. Like if I heard a loud bang downstairs and a gun went off or something, people started roaring and shouting, I would probably get anxious, and that's not irrational. That's like a very rational thing to something very dangerous that's happening. But the kid going into school and they're not being bullied and they're smart and they're able for the work and the teacher's lovely and they have one or two friends and there is zero reason for this anxiety, and yet every morning they're just completely and utterly flooded and overwhelmed. So that's the irrationality of this type of anxiety. And when you approach the dilemma with rationality, that tends not to help very much. It's a bit like kind of mixing oil and water. They're actually not going to mix at all. So there's a few things that help. First thing is stop reassuring. These conversations about the anxiety fortify the teenager's sense of not having faith in themselves. One of the things that I notice about conversations between young people and their parents is they tend to focus on problems, about what's difficult and what didn't go well and what you're worried about and what you're afraid of. And it's not good to talk about this anxiety all the time, because it reinforces a negative sense of self. I come home from school and Mom asked me how I got on, but almost there's sympathy in her voice. Oh, Bronagh, how did you get on today? And we start right there. And then I will tell her how terrible the whole thing was. And she will start to reassure me and kind of give me sympathy about it and big hugs and stuff like that. And really the statement that Mom is making to me is like, I don't have any faith that you will have got on well. So it's actually really interesting how negative the quality of the conversation tends to be between parents and anxious kids. So really be aware of that. And as Pooky said earlier on, shift the conversation focus. Ask them to talk about a few things that went well today. Sometimes 3 things is a bit ambitious. One thing that went well today. And you're in that saying to them, I expect that some things will have gone well. You might have to kind of really tease it out of them. But they develop this kind of almost victim consciousness. I can't do anything and I'm not fit to do it and everything's going to go badly. And then things that are positive, they actually don't focus on them. Like, what you have then is a teenager who maybe does an exam, there's 20 questions in the exam, and she does 19 of them absolutely perfectly, and there's one that she's not sure about, so she give it a best shot. She comes out of the exam and she's going to absolutely obsess about that one question, rather than thinking, do you know what, I know that I did really well, I know that I definitely passed, in fact I know that I got an exit, I know those 19 were good. So you're trying to support your kid to focus on the things that go okay. And the opposite of anxiety is courage. So having courage to say, yeah, I can do this, I can do that, to be a little bit more resourced. Another thing is when they are overwhelmed, we want to rush and make them feel better. And making them feel better is often very premature. The first thing you need to do is give them emotional language for their experience. And that will actually help them to become reasonable more quickly. I was talking about being unreasonable or irrational later on. So whenever we name someone's feelings, I'm talking to Katrina and I say, God, you sound really angry there, Katrina. And she's just been mouthing off about something. Once I say that, it supports her to kind of stop, get into a different part of her brain and reflect. And she goes, God, Bronagh, I actually am angry when I think about it. And what happens now, she begins to, after becoming aware of her feeling, she begins to contain her feeling. And that's so important because these kids can't contain their feelings. Like, anxiety is contagious, and oh, I'm really worried about this. And the next of it, I'm in this absolute spin. So rather than offering solutions and trying to fix, meet them by validating their feelings. So, and then do it very tentatively. I imagine that you feel really scared, or, I can hear how nervous you are about this, or gosh, it sounds like you're really worried that you'll not be able to be fit in and that you'll be lonely. But what feeling is she describing here? Give her the feeling back and try and get her into a conversation about her feeling. And that will work much better to stabilize the person a wee bit more. And then implement manageable steps. Anxious kids tend to be very dependent. So support them to do more things for themselves. Even going to school in the morning, you're so worried and they're not going to go to school. So you get their breakfast organized for them and you nearly dress them in the morning. You do this and you do that. And they come home from school and they're so stressed that you do everything. You make them a cup of tea or hot chocolate. So kind of asking yourself, am I supporting and fostering dependency here? Or am I supporting my kid to absolutely be at the growing edge of their life, that she's able to do all of the things that she can do, and that there isn't dependency there? And I suspect, and certainly it's been my experience over the years as a therapist, that anxious kids can do an awful lot more sometimes than parents let them do. Now, when she's at the edge of her comfort zone and that's overwhelming, that's a different matter. But even things like going and walking the dog and doing a wee bit of housework and dressing herself, or getting their homework done the same. Don't you pack the bag, let her pack the bag. You can supervise packing the bag, but don't pack the bag herself. So the more ownership a person has of their life, the less they tend to be anxious. And there are a few kind of dimensions of experience that tend to go out of balance. Sleep, exercise, diet, social activity, social media, and study. So just very briefly talk about those. So in terms of exercise and diet, it's always good. A lot of kids will just sit in the house and sit in their bedroom and sit on their phone. And movement, whenever you go out for a walk or go out for a run or go to the gym, you just always feel better. So physically moving your body is really helpful for anxiety. And the diet as well, the more they're drinking the boosts and they're eating the sweets and lots of carbs and stuff, that's actually not good. It's kind of anxiety provoking food. So try and get good nutrition into these kids. With social anxiety and social activity, try and get them interests and outside of the house and outside of school, some kind of groups and interests that they have. And it's a great way to actually meet other people, which is lovely. set limits on their overstudying and their understudying. So the overstudiers tend to be perfectionists, and instead of like an hour a day in the evenings doing your homework, it's 3.5 hours. And if you have a kid who's maybe moving into first year or second year in secondary school and they're doing 3.5 hours study, where are they going to be when they get to college and you're not even there to soothe them down? So that overstudying just festers and festers and festers, and it's creating more and more and more anxiety, more stress, more pressure all the time. So nip that in the bud. You've got an hour, you've got an hour and a half, but limit the study time in the evenings. Maybe different when we're coming to exams or coursework or whatever. And then the understudying ones, they're the kids that are phobic. I'm not doing any homework because it makes me think of school and it makes me anxious. So what you would do with those kids is maybe for an hour a week, they're probably not handing in much work, but 1 hour a week, they get to pick 2 subjects that they like, they like a little bit even, and they do maybe 30 minutes of each of them. Just getting them to do something rather than allowing that phobia to continue, not good. And then a big one is actually around the phone, because anxious kids use their phone as anti-anxiety medication. Actually, when I'm on my phone, I can navigate that world and I don't feel so anxious. It's harder to be out in the kind of analog world. And also, girls particularly use their phone to feel even worse about themselves. Anxious kids tend not to feel great about themselves. And I just have this sad, pathetic life, and I'm sitting on Instagram looking at everybody else on Friday night out with their beautiful bodies and their big social lives, and away they go. And it's a way for me to hammer myself. So a couple of things that work really well around school. No phones in the bedroom at night. Your phone shouldn't be within 6 meters of your head at night for a really good night's sleep. And the teenagers get their phone in the morning, but only when they're ready for school. So you have your bag packed, and you have your uniform on, you've had your breakfast or whatever. Then, otherwise, if they have this phone in the morning, you're shouting them to get up, and then you come into the bedroom to make sure they're up, and there's like 1 foot in the trousers, and they're sitting on Instagram, frozen in time, checking something out. So it just makes you late, makes everybody stressed. No screens in the evening until homework is done, and it's a good motivator to just get the homework out of the road. They've been anxious about school all day. It's been difficult, a pressure chamber. They come home in the evening, and now I'm going to have to sit here and do this homework, and I'm putting it off. Avoidance is a big thing for anxious kids. I put it off. And I'm actually anxious and filled with dread all night knowing that I have to do my homework. So immediately they do the homework and then they get their phone. Pack your bag before you finish, which is for all kids. Pack your bag in the evenings before you finish your homework. That's like the last task of homework to do. So there isn't that flurry in the morning. You don't want anxious kids to be stressed in the mornings. And put your phone away 30 minutes before bedtime. So if you want your child to be in bed by 10 o'clock, 9:30, the phones are off. And it allows the sleep centers in the brain to activate. So even those things at night, so physiologically, if your kid isn't primed for anxiety, they will be able to navigate that world a little bit better. And just the final thing to leave you with is the absolutely best thing teenagers can do for yoga or for anxiety is yoga. Yoga is just so powerful at getting rid of our stress. So get them on YouTube with yoga, or get them to a class with you. So hopefully that's again very quick, but hopefully there's something there that you can take away around that.
Thank you so much. That was brilliant. I have 2 teenagers, and I have just given me food for thought with the old phones. Have to get the phones out of their hands, up in the bedroom.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
It's a tough one. With some questions in. So Sharon is saying, my son has social anxiety, finds school stressful, and now has to wear a brace, and he's now freaking out because he can't talk properly and is worried people will laugh and he will stand out. He has to take braces out when eating. I've had to keep the brace at home for the first few days as he finds it hard enough just to go to school in general.
Okay. So rather than power struggling about the brace, it's useful to, you know, if the boy wants to wear a brace, like, you know, a lot of kids want the Hollywood smile, so they're wearing the brace. And a way that you can kind of go with that is, you know, to say to him, it's called the paradoxical approach to change. What about just forgetting about the brace? You know, you've enough to go on. What about if you don't want to bother wearing the brace, and sure, we'll just throw it in the bin and cancel the rest of the dental appointments. So rather than mom or dad making me wear this and I'm not wearing it today or whatever, that we give him the choice to wear it or not. Now that works if you know that he really wants to wear it, but if he's not bothered about wearing it, then he'll go, yeah, I don't care about it. So that can be where he feels self-conscious, but he's choiceful that I'm going to barge through this because I really want my teeth to be better. I suppose the difficulty that the parent is naming there is these kids are stuck in a part of the brain called the cerebral cortex, and they are highly negative about themselves. They're so self-critical. I hate how I look, and I'm so fat, and I'm so ugly, and I'm so stupid, and I'm not good enough at this. And one of the fundamental aspects of a person's experience is I am not good enough. So they become very self-conscious about how they look. So choicefulness about the brace will be your best bet. Hopefully he wants to wear it.
Thank you. We have another one in there. How do you help a child who refuses to get dressed and go to school and is really upset, crying, rocking, and just very distressed, and they are transition age?
Oh,
that's quite a few people.
That's really difficult, that one there, because you almost have paralysis in the morning, because to actively put my sleeve into the shirt means that I'm expressing willingness to go to school. So there's loads of kids that become ragdolls in the morning, and parents actually physically have to dress them, put the socks on, put the skirt on, put the trousers on, and that's really difficult. So rather than trying to goad them into it, you're better to, you know, they're having to go to school. That just feels absolutely overwhelming. Break it down. We get the uniform on, and then we'll see how we feel. So we've 4 stages going to school in the morning. One is getting up, and the second is putting your uniform on, the third is brushing your teeth, and the fourth is whatever. And putting your uniform on doesn't necessarily mean you're going to school. It just means you're going to get dressed and put your uniform on. So it's like, can I just take it in that manageable chunk and get my uniform on? And I'm going to have to dress the kid, but will she put on her left sock? That's a start. And then next week, maybe she'll do both her socks. And eventually this ragdoll starts to dress herself. And it really is a statement about, you know, if I'm passive, and they are literally like a ragdoll. If I am passive, it means that I'm not engaging with school at all. Yeah, it's a safe posture, but very stressful for parents.
Yeah, of course. There's another one there then. How can I support my daughter who is going into college this year to relieve her stress about the new change, or any tips into settling into college?
Okay, so with college, there's a bit more awareness, and this is the second or third time that this person has transitioned. So there are 2 things to really balance. If you support your daughter to balance around her social life, that in the first 3 weeks, it's really vital when you go to college that you reach out to people, you know. So if I'm sitting beside Katrina, you know, if I go into a lecture hall and there's a seat over there by itself, and there's a seat here beside this girl, have the courage of a lion and go and sit beside her and just turn around and go, oh, hi, I'm Bronagh. And Katrina might turn around and go, shut up, or might, oh, hi, I'm Katrina. Much more likely that she'll be nice. And they're reaching out in the first few weeks. Lets people know that you're open to social connection, even if the heart is thumping out of your chest. So support her to have courage socially for the first few weeks, and come out of her room if she can. And the second one is the academic. piece, that she does enough but not too much, and it's okay if she doesn't understand it all at the beginning. It's like, you know, she's just settling and she's trying to find her feet, and encourage her to talk to her program leaders and stuff like that about academic, you know, overwhelm, because, you know, anxious kids are usually like fine academically, but they feel inadequate, and there's a lot of new stuff and not knowing stuff, which for other people who are maybe a bit more resourceful go, oh, this is challenging, and oh, I'm going to have to get my head around this. But anxious people often have a collapse response. So something new that I don't really understand, I'm just going to cry. I'm going to have a panic attack. I can't do this. I'm leaving college. This is not okay. I'm not able to do this. And it's supporting her not to collapse. Even saying that to her, you know, like your go-to is collapse. Let's try something different. Let's try courage.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Bronagh. Thanks a lot. We're going to move on now to our third speaker. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was wonderful.
Sure, my pleasure. Good luck, everyone, with the start of the academic year. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so our next speaker this evening is Lauren Spiers from Parenting NI. Parenting NI is a parent advice centre providing free support for parents across Northern Ireland. Parenting NI free phone helpline and other regional services, initially delivered by volunteers and now by trained staff, has helped thousands of parents, grandparents and others in a parenting role for over 4 decades. Parenting NI is committed to supporting all parents and ensuring that their voices are heard whenever decisions are made that will affect them. They deliver a range of high-quality support and services to meet parents' needs. Please welcome Lauren from Parenting NI.
Thank you, Katrina, and good evening, everybody. Thanks to everybody for giving up your time this evening, and thanks to Pooky and Bronagh for their presentations. I find them both very useful, and in particular, especially for my 3-year-old who started nursery this week and found it really, really difficult. So some really, really helpful practical tips that you both gave there. Thank you. I'm going to share with you a few slides, and this evening I'm going to talk about parents' emotional health and well-being. I'm going to talk about a couple of things. I'm going to take you through a set of parenting styles that date right back to the 1960s by a lady called Diana Baumrind, and I'll take you through the parenting styles. And when I'm doing this, I'd really like you to think about what type of parenting style you have, and for those of your partners, whether together or not, the people around you, what type of parenting style they might have. I'm secondly going to talk about stress and the impact that this can have on our parenting style. And the two are intrinsically linked, because we know that if we feel good in ourselves, we're more likely to have an authoritative parenting style. And this is the parenting style that I'm going to take us through. In Parenting NI, we talk a lot about making our children feel safe. And when I talk about making our children feel safe, I mean that we make them feel emotionally and psychologically safe inside. And if we do that, they have those better outcomes in life that they're all trying to strive to achieve. For example, being more resilient, because we want to have children who can cope with whatever life is going to throw at them, because life is hard. That we have children who can, do well in school, that can have those healthy relationships, that can have that high self-esteem, because of the huge connotations there for our mental health. So when I talk about making our children feel safe, I talk about in the sense of an authoritative parenting style. So on the screen now, you will see an authoritative parenting style on the screen there. It looks very simple, but in reality, it can be really hard to be this type of parenting style. And I want to get that across to everybody this evening, that it's hard to be an authoritative parenting style, that all the research points towards us being as much of the time as we can. I'll take you through the four points. So the first is that we have that warmth and that love and that trust for our children, whether we have a toddler, whether we have a teenager. And this can be really, really difficult to get across that warmth and that love, especially for those of you who have those children around that early adolescence, teenager years. So just to think about how we get across that love and that warmth based on those little natures of our children. So it might be, and you know your children best, it might be giving them that little hug. It might not be, that might be the worst thing that they want. It might be taking them up that cup of hot chocolate when they're studying for their exams. It might be saying, right, books down, let's take the dogs out for a walk. It might be texting them. It might be the power of touch. Just think about how we get across that warmth and that love for our children. The second point with an authoritative parenting style is that we have those rules and those boundaries in our home. And back to what I said at the start there about making our children feel safe, the rules and the boundaries that you have in your home go a long way in making your children feel safe. If it makes you feel any better when you're setting your rules. So our children are, they may huff and puff about having rules in their home, but they indirectly make them feel safe. They indirectly make them feel like somebody cares about them. Please don't overthink your rules. A rule for you might be that your children go to bed at a certain time, or what Bronagh said there around technology. It might be that everybody sits together at dinner time because it's the only 5 minutes that you have of asking what your day has been like. So make your rules work for you, and your rules will be completely unique to you as a family, and obviously age appropriately. The third point with an authoritative parenting style is that we have those clear expectations and standards for behaviour. And all I mean when I say that is that we have conversations with our children about what those rules are. If we ask them what they think the rules should be, obviously being age appropriate, they're far more likely to adhere to those rules because they feel valued, because they feel respected, because they feel heard, because they feel like they have a voice. It's so important that we ask our children what they think the rules should be. So parents might know in their head what the rules are going to be, but always ask your children so that they feel involved in that process. And the final point with an authoritative parenting style, and Bronagh adhered to this, is that we have that good relationship with our children, because we want to have that good relationship with our children. We want them to come home and have those conversations with us about those little worries if they've had a bad day at school, if they're being bullied by somebody, if they're worried about starting whatever new class. We want them to come and have those conversations. And the foundation of that is the relationship that we have with our children, that is based on good communication, that is based on discussion, that is based on negotiation and compromise. And a lot of people will always ask, is that negotiation and compromise with our children not a weakness? And it's absolutely not. And that might look like, if you have a child who wants to come home at 9 o'clock and you want them to come home at 8 o'clock, that your compromise is 8:30. We want it to be win-win for both parties involved. And negotiation and compromise is a huge part of that. An authoritative parenting style is that reassuring, that supportive parent. And I hope that showing you this slide has reassured a lot of you this evening that you are that type of parent. And I'm going to take you through the next parenting styles. But what we so often hear in Parenting and I is that there is no one parenting style for each parent. We're all over the show and we're inconsistent. And hence why I am sharing with you these parenting styles, because if we don't look after ourselves, we are more likely to do one of two things. We are more likely to be a permissive parent and give in, or do the opposite, come down quite hard on our children and be that authoritarian parent. So we're all over the show. And I can talk about self-care of parents all day, and I'm sure we're all well versed in what self-care means, but we just don't do it. We just put everybody else first before ourselves. But that self-care of us as parents is so important to make us more likely to be this type of parenting style that I'm sharing with you on the screen now. The next parenting style I'll quickly take you through is a permissive parent. And this is, in Parenting and I, this is probably the most common for us at the minute. And nothing wrong with this parenting style. Parents have that warmth and that love for their children. But there's few rules and boundaries in that home, or maybe in the parent's head, they think they've got all these rules, but they struggle following through with them. The children don't really have clear expectations about what's important. Or what the standards of behaviour are in their home, and they're allowed a great deal of freedom. So what will happen in the home is they'll just start to push those boundaries that little bit further every time they go. The third parenting style, this is an authoritarian parenting style. And if you see the types of words that are being used here, requires obedience and punishes disobedience, quite hard. There's little warmth or affection in the home. There's too many rules and consequences. Sometimes if we have too many rules and consequences in our home, our children can take a step back and can stop listening. There's no compromise, so no means no, end of story. And there's no negotiation. And what we can sometimes find with children of an authoritarian parent is that they can rebel, or they can almost tell little lies and little fibs just because they're scared of that reaction. A huge part of an authoritative parent is our reactions to situations at home, and that we are calm. And keeping calm is easier said than done, but we can be calm because we have our rules and our boundaries, keeping our children safe, and we have that good relationship with our children. The final parenting style I want to share with you is a disengaged parenting style. And I want to say that this is a short-term, or can be a short-term parenting style, maybe a parent going through parental mental ill health. They can express little love or affection for their children. They can be uninvolved in their behaviours or don't correct that behaviour, and they're unaware of the child's needs. So what can sometimes happen is that children can engage in mistaken behaviour, maybe struggle in school, struggle socially. But back to what I said at the start, because they don't feel safe. And what we can find as parents is that we can jump all over the social. We can jump from a disengaged to a permissive to an authoritarian to an authoritative parent. And again, just to raise the importance of looking after ourselves as parents to make us more likely to be that authoritative parenting style that I've spoken about there. What we can find also in our homes is that parents can be different parenting styles. I think it's about 82-83% of parents, whether together or not, are different parenting styles. So maybe one parent is quite laid back and another parent can be quite strict. And we know our children are very smart and can just play us off one another. So what the research says is that we want to be an authoritative parent as much of the time as possible, and that's enough. Parents put an overwhelming amount of pressure on themselves to be a certain type of parent. So just some top tips for being that authoritative parenting style. And again, easier said than done, keeping calm. And we want to respond calmly and have that reaction of calmness because it instills that reaction, that calmness in our children. We want to discuss our concerns that we have with our children, obviously being age appropriate and voicing our concerns. We want to listen and acknowledge their feelings. And in parenting and I, as our children get older, we say that we want to talk less and listen more, which can be quite difficult for some parents. But we want to acknowledge their feelings. We want to validate those feelings, no matter what those feelings are. If it's anger, if it's sadness, if it's disappointment, we want to acknowledge what those feelings are. Establish those rules and those boundaries and have those conversations with our children about what we want in our home to make that home a happy and a healthy home. And again, a lot of what Pooky and Bronagh were saying there about, establishing those routines in our home, make them work for you. And that can be quite a helpful strategy around school time. That reassurance and that support goes without saying. And then finally, praising that good behaviour and those improvements that you see in your children. So moving on to talk about stress, and we know that stress is different for everybody. And parenting and I at the minute, we have a lot of parents under severe amounts of pressure for whatever reasons. We have those physiological signs of stress and those psychological signs of stress. So those physiological symptoms are things like those heart palpitations that you might have, those sweaty palms, maybe back pain, muscle ache. But those psychological symptoms very quickly go unnoticed by parents. So things like maybe people in work are annoying you more than usual, or you're struggling to make decisions, or you're maybe quite indecisive, or not feeling yourself. That's your body's way of trying to tell you to take a step back. But we keep going and we keep going. And if we use the analogy of that bridge, we break. So engage. We want to encourage that self-care of parents, and that we are getting that time to ourselves every day to make us more likely to manage our levels of stress. And I can share with you just some signs of stress there: not being able to sleep properly because you've got too much going on in your head, being quite impatient or quite irritable, maybe at work or in home life with relationships with people around us, maybe not being able to concentrate, being able to make those decisions that we maybe would have made quite quickly previously, maybe drinking or smoking more, not enjoying food as much or maybe too much, again, not being as healthy as we maybe normally were, being unable to relax and always feeling that something needs to be done. And again, that ability not to be able to switch off and relax can be quite debilitating too. And there's those headaches and that muscle tension that I was talking about, and those physical symptoms of stress. Chronic stress. So we know that chronic stress can be so overwhelming, and chronic stress is constant, persistent stress over a period of time. And it can have huge health implications for us, for ourselves, and for us as parents. Depression, anxiety, IBS, it can manifest itself in many, many different ways. Maybe the development of unhealthy habits, like the smoking, the excess drinking, high blood pressure, and strain in relationships and family life, and those people, even our support systems around ourselves. Our acute stress, so this is stress that I experienced maybe after a traumatic event in our lives, where we feel really tense, and we know that our fight or flight hormones can be released. And these can include things like, you have those sickness in your tummy, feeling quite sweaty, maybe a dry mouth, that increased heart rate that we always feel, low energy, maybe more likely to have those frequent colds and flus, and that irritable mood, and having those angry outbursts. And linking back to the parenting styles there, we do those one of two things. We become that permissive parent where we say, go on ahead because we're tired and we've had a really hard day, and we do anything for an easy life. Or the opposite, we come down quite hard on our children, and it's that inconsistency that our children don't like. They crave that consistency, they crave that routine and making them feel safe. We know the impact of stress on our children. We know that our children can be hugely receptive to the physical and emotional well-being of parents, and what we are looking at is for changes in behaviour. So, for example, changes in their sleeping patterns, changes in their eating patterns, but we know that we want to reduce the impact on our children as much as we can, and I hope this evening you think about whether you look after yourselves and whether you have self-care of yourself as a parent as a priority. We want to have that open, that honest, that continuous relationship with our children, and being an authoritative parenting style plays a little part in the bigger picture of that there. If there are changes in your behaviour, we want our children to know that any changes is not a result of them, and that they don't carry that guilt. And again, having that open and that honest and that continuous relationship goes a long way in alleviating any little anxieties that they may have around those fears. I want to take you through some ways that we can improve our parental mental ill health. And these are simple things that you can implement in your home, and I hope that you do already. Taking steps to look after your own health, and that is little things such as our sleeping, our eating, our exercise. And, if exercise is not for you, being outside in green areas, kind of adapting that exercise in ways to make it work for you. Our diet, our sleeping. That we are putting little things in place, and sometimes those little changes that we make to our routine can have a big impact. Having that support system in place, so that's us having one or two key people in our lives that we can go to in times of stress. So maybe it is a partner, maybe it is a family member or a friend, somebody that you can go to and offload when you're not feeling yourself. Talking about our mental health, so we are getting a little bit better, and we have a long way to go, but we are getting better in talking about mental health. And we know that if we talk about how we feel, it releases those neurotransmitters in our brain and soothes us down. Same applies to children, same applies to our adults. Being organised as much as we can, so maybe practical things like using a Sunday to prepare your dinners, or encouraging our children to pack their bags the evening before. Delegating to our children, again, it's fantastic for that brain development, encourage that independence, fantastic for their self-esteem. So delegating those tasks to our older children if possible. Things like doing our shopping online. I think COVID went a long way in moving us online with regards to paying our bills online and doing our shopping online, just to give us that little bit more time to do other tasks around the house if need be. And then finally, seeking help when we need it. And again, a huge part of that is us being able to talk about it. That might be to our support system. But there are services out there that are fantastic in supporting parents, voluntary and statutory services, and that exist, even during COVID, whether online or in person, but those services exist. And please use your support system that you have in your home to approach those services. Some practical ways that we can boost our mental health, and I'm not going to take you through all of these, but things like, getting up that little bit earlier, to have that cup of tea before your kids get up out of bed, focus on your strengths. We want to be really solution focused and focus on our positives. Sleep can have a huge impact on our mental health, that we are getting, whatever hours we need, 8-9 hours sleep a night. Trying something new, whatever that might be, showing a friend some love, and offering our help to friends in times that they can go a long way in making us feel that little bit better. Chocolate, again, research being done now on having that little bit of chocolate to make yourself feel better and boost that brain power. Taking time out And again, why our rules and our routine that we have in our home can go a long way, and us being able to take time out. So for example, if your kids go to bed at 8 o'clock, that's your time to get ready for the next day, to, you know, to have that bath, to go for that walk, to whatever it might be, that you have that time out to make you more likely to be that authoritative parenting style there that we're talking about. You know, having a warm bath, spending time with pets, a lot of research being done on the power of dogs, improving your diet, spending time with those positive people around you, whoever that might be, your support system, or those friendships that you maybe have neglected because we have been so busy. A lot of research being done now on the impact that green areas is having on our mental health. You know, being able to take that time in the evening to get out for a walk, to, you know, to have that time to think to yourselves can have a huge impact on us feeling that a little bit better. And if you can, getting that 15 minutes of daily sunshine, although I'm not too sure how much longer we're going to get that for, but again, that vitamin D goes a long way in making us feel that little bit better in ourselves. So just to link the two concepts that I've spoken about there, you know, we want to be aware of how we feel in ourselves and whether we are looking after our mental health. Again, I said about parents putting everybody else first before themselves, but we want to put ourselves first so that we are able to be that authoritative parent and to have that open, honest, continuous relationship with our children to support them through difficult times like transitions in their lives, like starting school or puberty or whatever that might be. So we want to look after ourselves to be more likely to be that authoritative parenting style. Back to what I said at the start there about making our children feel safe. This goes a long way in helping them have those better outcomes in life. Okay, folks, I'm going to stop that there. Please feel you're more than welcome to have the presentation, and please share with your friends, your family, your colleagues, whoever you might feel relevant.
Lauren, thank you so much. That was fantastic. I suppose what I've taken from that is the importance of the support system around you as well. That was kind of thing as a parent, being able to chat to someone. And I know you guys as parents, and I do a lot of groups and courses for parents, and it's okay to say, look, I need a wee bit of a hand.
Yeah, and we've really noticed over the last couple of years an increase in, so in Parenting and I, we have a support line and we have trained counsellors at the end of the phone, and our calls have increased, which is fantastic to know that people are using the service. But, you know, parents are really struggling, and I think that's really important for parents. You know, I don't think social media does us any favours when we're seeing, you know, families with their lovely cooked dinners and their nice, clean, tidy houses and their well-behaved kids. But in reality, it's hard. And I think if we talked a lot more about how hard it was, and it would go a long way in supporting one another. But the helpline is there if anybody wants to avail of any support, and train counsellors there to take the call.
I think you've addressed this one, but there was a question came in there about accessing your services, but you had your stuff up there. There's one here from Neve. Should you be honest with your child if they're old enough about mental ill health?
Yeah, I think it's really positive to talk about mental health, to not make it a taboo. You know, as I said, that we're getting better at talking about mental health. We want everybody to know that everybody has a mental health, and we are all on that continuum. Whether we feel good some days and maybe not so good the next, that's okay. So, you know, obviously being age appropriate and within reason, but talking about everybody's mental health is an absolute positive. And, you know, talking about the schools are getting fantastic at this now with children, and talking about what stress is for them, because stress for all children is different. And then secondly, and most importantly, coping strategies for children. So what Bronagh and Pooky adhere to there, that we want our children to have those 1 or 2 coping mechanisms that they have, whatever it might be. If it's talking to a parent, if it's sticking their earphones in, you know, if it's playing sport or whatever it might be, that our children have those ways of coping with the stress that they face in their lives. And that's a really important point in creating that emotionally happy and healthy child that we're talking about.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation, Lauren. Thank you. Just to thank you all again for attending tonight. We hope you find it insightful. The Our Generation project has been funded through the European Union's Peace 4 project, managed by SEUPB, with match funding for the project provided by the Executive Office in Northern Ireland and the Department of Rural and Community Development in Ireland. We would like to thank them for their support through funding this project. I would also like to thank the Cooperation Ireland team, of the Our Generation team, and our technical team at Planned Events for their hard work in the planning and organisation of this webinar today.